Welcome to Biome. This is Alex Zubin, your host, narrator, and the elf who is totally not giving you the wrong directions in the deep dark woods. I'm so glad you're joining me today for our latest author interview. Last week's interview with Steve Zissin was posted in written form, which is available for free on Patreon, and you can find that link in the show notes. The story behind the story is often just as interesting as the story we read on the page. That's why today, I'm excited to share my interview with M.D. Smith, author of our 8th story, Bright Eyes and the Lantern Path. Listeners voted this story as the #1 most favorite story of Season 1, so it's a real treat to get to chat with M.D. Bright Eyes and the Lantern Path is a wonderful story about a friendship between Bright Eyes, the cat, and his person, a witch named Tarantelina. In this story, the duo face not one, not two, but 3 villains who threaten the peace of old New Orleans. M.D. Smith IV of Huntsville, Alabama, writer of over 350 flash stories, has published digitally in Spillwords, Flash Fiction Magazine, Flash Phantoms, and many more. Retired from running a television station, he lives with his wife of 64 years and 3 cats. And now, on to our interview. So, obviously cats feature a certain cat features very prominently in this story. He's feisty, he's lovable, and he acts as the center of this story, as well as other stories you've written, I think you mentioned. Is he the kernel of this story? Is Bright Eyes the image that kicked off this particular story? Or was there some image or idea that launched into this particular adventure?
I've written stories in the past from a cat's point of view. And it just occurred to me when I'm telling a true story about some tarantulas one of my sons had growing up. And I thought, that could be a good name for a good witch. And that would made up nicely with a Bright Eyes, who has this strange power to melt wills with his eyes. So that's how I kind of moved into it. And this is the 3rd of stories using those 2 characters and from the cat's point of view.
That's really wonderful. And I love his point of view. I'm curious, do you frequently write from point of view of non-human characters, or is Bright Eyes kind of an exception to the rule?
Well, of all the stories I've written, I would say maybe 1 out of 15 or 20 are from a non-human point of view.
I see. And do you find that allows you to do something different that human characters don't typically allow you to engage with?
Yeah, and I try to have a little fun with it too. And in some of my other pieces, the Bright Eyes is even more sarcastic, horribly sarcastic, but goes along with Tarantelina anyhow all the time.
Perfect. Is there a certain reader or readers that you have in mind as you write the stories about Bright Eyes?
Normally, I'm thinking a little more of an adult female and perhaps a slightly older audience, because that's kind of my point of view. And I try to. Almost everybody has had an animal, and I've written from dogs' point of views as well, because I think it's more relatable that way. And some of their ticks and the things they do, I work into the story. But it's I purred and rubbed up against her leg, So I like to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that inclusion of those details throughout this story really kind of gives it that sense of who Bright Eyes is and really brings us into that character, which really wonderful, really delightful. Was there any part of this story that you were nervous about writing, scared about writing, not sure if you should write? I know that for the most part, it's a very positive kind of story, but was there anything that you kind of thought to yourself, maybe I shouldn't write this?
This one was okay. I wrote one where there was a little more grim ending to it, and it has not been accepted yet. It may not work because of that reason. You just don't need anything too terribly heavy, although the outcome of these 2 kind of counter wishes in this tale is not necessarily happy for them, but it gets rid of a problem in the New Orleans area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, their ending is definitely pretty grim and gruesome for them. I think that at the same time, it sort of serves a kind of poetic justice. We're not shocked, and it's not a voyeuristic sort of death either. It just kind of happens, and then we move on to sort of the biggest, baddest villain of them all in this story. What was the most difficult scene of this particular story for you to write?
I think perhaps the meeting in her apartment when they came up the stairs. I knew I wanted a lot of conflict there. And I knew I wanted, like a lot of stories, to almost seem like the bad guys were going to win. And so that took a couple of rewrites to get that where I was happy with it.
I see. And when you were rewriting it, was that in order to work out pace? Was it around dialogue? Was it just around the general blocking of the action?
Can you it was the blocking of the action more than anything else to make sure it felt natural, natural for the supernatural, of course.
Absolutely.
But the getting knocked up against the wall and how you would slump, those are the things I polished more in that area of the story than other parts of it.
I see. Yeah. As I was reading it, I felt the blocking was very nice there, and I could envision the action. I could envision them throwing the sack over Bright Eyes, and that moment of, well, maybe they won't get out of this. Maybe the sisters will get away with it, which is a wonderful sort of escalation, elevation of the situation, of the danger. Did you consider any alternative endings to this particular story, or did you always kind of feel like this was headed in a particular direction?
I think perhaps at the very beginning I did, because in some of the other stories, the foes are like put on a barge in the Mississippi and floated out to who knows where, and there is no definite ending. And I thought about that, but then I thought, no, I really think I want a little more definite, this is all for them kind of conclusion.
Yeah.
And I had a shorter version of the story, a flash version too, that didn't have quite the detail and didn't have exactly the same ending, but it did for the sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think now you have me curious. The previous ending, was it just ending with the sisters, or what? Can you tell us a little bit about how that one looked?
Well, that was the ending right there. Yeah.
I see. But Bright Eyes was still the hero there.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Are there any sort of little details, little Easter eggs within this story that folks might not notice, but that you would love to point out and say, there's this little reference here?
I believe the part that I enjoyed writing was the setup of the meeting, and the fact that midnight came and nothing happened. And I think Tarantulas says something like, well, it's just like them to probably be a half hour late, 12:30 on the button. And then how they kind of glided up the stairs almost like ghosts. Their heads didn't bobble at all.
Mm-hmm.
That was the details that I particularly liked writing in this story.
Yeah, and it's very vivid. It's very cinematic. I mean, between the Raven and the sisters, you can really kind of get that mood, that atmosphere. Which is one of the things I loved about this story, is how very atmospheric it is. It really brings me into the scene. So would you ever consider writing any of their adventures from Tarantulas' point of view? I know we have several from Bright Eyes, but does she ever get kind of her perspective?
No, I don't think I would. I've written other stories from a human point of view, generally a woman. Women read more stories than men do. But this is a pair, and in my mind, it's fixed very well. And the more you revisit these folks, there's another story that was written after this where she buys an old haunted house.
Mm.
She and Bright Eyes confront 5 ghosts, and Bright Eyes is particularly sarcastic about this rundown house, and she says it just needs a good painting, and Bright Eyes says, no, it needs a priest and an exorcist and a fire is what it needs. So Bright Eyes gets really sarcastic in that, and that's the fun thing. And knowing from the cat's point of view, and she can kind of insult her. And of course, Tarantulas, while there's no dialogue spoke, she knows everything the cat says.
Yeah,
that's the way to write the story.
Yeah, and I think any pet owner who's lived with an animal for a long time, you just sort of know what they're thinking. You have that communication where you feel each other's hearts, and that's evident from this story as well. I think it's beautiful. So now I'll move on to our flash round of questions. We'll really quickly go through some ways to see what kind of writer you are. So the first one I think is just a very easy one. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I'm a plotter.
Okay. Always.
Almost always. I really just start out with a character and go from that.
Okay. And what would you say is your sort of preferred power hour? Do you write your best in the morning? Do you reserve your energy for the evening? Or is there a time during the day where you feel like you're at your best?
I think my best times are in the morning, and I regularly meet with a group that meets from 9 to 11 my time. And we just introduce what we're planning on doing during the 2 hours. And everybody gets muted on the Zoom session. We write, we have a little coffee break on the hour, and then at the end, we sum it up. So it's just a good time to sit together and to dedicate to write Monday through Friday. And on the weekend, I don't do all that much. So I'll often spend the same morning time, sometimes later in the morning. Then I have another afternoon session, and I almost never write after dinner. Mm-hmm. I'm not sharp then, and so I don't ever write after dinner.
I see. Well, that is very inspiring, I think, for people to hear that dedication, to hear that the value of having that group of people around you. Do you prefer always to write on computer, by hand, or do you mix it up?
Always computer. My handwriting is so sloppy I can barely read my own what used to be script or writing. So almost everything is done on the computer, and that makes editing so much easier. It's instantly there, and I can go through. I'll run it through Grammarly usually, and get some ideas and spell check, and then I often I try to write my first draft quick and finish it, so that all the ideas flow out from this plot in my head. And it's really in the second and third revisions that I really come alive. That's where the dialogue and the metaphors come from. And I think about it. Would a nice simile work here? And then, fiddle around with two or three until I come up with one. So the polished stages is what really makes the story mm-hmm. good. Mm-hmm. I'd be so embarrassed. I don't send anybody my first draft.
I see. Well, I think that the results speak for themselves. I think the polish really comes out, and you end up with some wonderful stories. Another question for you is your drafting vibe. Do you prefer to write with music or some kind of sound in the background, or is it dead silence, or do you start with music and then turn it off?
You can't even hear the music in the background because it's very, very low. But I did a lot of shotgun hunting, quail hunting, dove hunting, and didn't use earplugs when I was younger. So I have this ring in my ears. Mm. For that reason, I even go to sleep at night with soft instrumental music playing on the CD player. And I write always at my office, which I attend until 2:00, come home. And my home where I am now, I'm in a downstairs MD's room. It's his cave room, man cave. And I have music playing even right now because it helps. The silence is unnerving because I hear that ringing all the time.
I see.
So I have music.
And do you listen to music that inspires the piece you're working on, or is it just something in the background?
It's almost always background instrumental. On occasion, for a particular story, where sometimes it's even built around the characters and some pop songs of whatever time period I'm writing, I'll put that music on mm-hmm. because that will put you in the mood, and you get in the mood, so to speak, as you're writing. Yeah, I've done that.
Wonderful. Well, I have one more final lightning round question for you. If you were going to have a nice dinner and drinks with one author, living or historical, who would it be and why? And what would you talk about?
Well, that so many come to mind. Well, it's probably because I'm also a teacher, and I teach a creative fiction writing class at the Senior Center on Thursday afternoons. And we're currently covering Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And this is my fourth reading of it, going through it, and we're having open discussions about it. And I've just seen his life story on Netflix. It's something like Phony in the Rye. I can't remember the word there. but it's all about his life. And he only wrote one novel, just that Catcher in the Rye, and he would never let them make a Hollywood movie out of it. He just felt like they wouldn't get Holden Caulfield right. I would love to sit down and chat with that man, even though he was more of a recluse than a lot of writers are. I would enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of what you would discuss, would it be his technique or his choices?
I'd like to know more about, he finished the story after World War II, and he was in the war for 2 years, the last 2 years. I'd like to know, did that war influence Holden Caulfield?
Mm-hmm.
Holden is really not completely settled. He begins the story in a rest institution somewhere that his parents have put him in. And you understand why as the story continues over just 5 nights from the Saturday night he flunks out of school until the Wednesday when he's supposed to be off for Christmas break. And an awful lot happens that are unsettling. He proclaims all the things he dislikes in the story and then turns out to do just those things.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, Mr. Sounder, was there any of that you in there?
Yeah. What part of yourself, what part of the author's psychology, author's story is part of the character? Absolutely. Well, MD, thank you so much for joining tonight. I'm really glad we got to chat here a little bit more about this story, about Bright Eyes. I loved hearing your perspectives on J.D. Salinger as well. For everybody listening, I hope you go back and check out Bright Eyes and the Lantern Path. That is our 8th story. Absolutely wonderful, remarkable. And thank you again so much. Please go check it out.
Alex, it was my privilege. I certainly enjoyed it. I'm ready to speak anytime you want me to again.
If you enjoyed this interview, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. I also hope you consider sharing this podcast with somebody who loves great fiction. Next week's interview with River S will be released as a written exchange exclusively on Patreon. The interview will be available for free, but I hope you consider signing up to support Biome so I can keep sharing amazing stories and interviews with you. You'll find the link in the show notes. But for now, dear listener, farewell wherever the days take you.